My name is Stephen J. Abramson, and today I have the great pleasure and honor to interview Pat Boone for the Archive of American Television.
You say that now. You may regret it later.
I'll never regret it. I promise you that. We are in Los Angeles, California. Today is September 10th, 2010.
Charles Eugene Boone on my birth certificate.
And how did you become Pat?
Good question. My folks, I was their first. Mama was a nurse, and we didn't have amniocentesis then, so they just assumed this first child was going to be a girl. And they had named her Patricia, and it had been shortened to Pat by the time I was born. And then when I was born, they looked and they saw there'd been a terrible miscalculation. And so they then named me after my two grandfathers, Charles and Eugene, and then kept on calling me Pat anyway. I was always Pat, and that was fine with me, except in 7th, 8th grade, early days of high school, I got some spam mail, junk mail to Miss Pat Boone, and I began to wish I'd been called Chuck or Gene or Charlie or Chaz, but I've lived through it.
When and where were you born?
Born in Jacksonville, Florida, 1934, and June 1st. I have a key to the city that the mayor gave me 40 years later, and the little notice at the hospital, born to Margaret Pritchard Boone, boy, normal. That's all it said. And then 40 years later, I get the key to the city.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up really in Nashville, Tennessee. My dad, a building contractor, and eventually it was his uncle's company, which he took over, and it was the Boone Contracting Company. And so he moved as an architect and would-be contractor. He moved to Nashville, and I was 2 and my brother was 1. And from then on, we grew up in Nashville till I was married.
What was your father's name?
My dad was Archie Altman Boone, A.A. Boone, the first Boone in the phone book. You can't get ahead of A.A.
And you mentioned your mom's name. What did she do?
Mama was a registered nurse, and had she not been a registered nurse, she would have been, I guess, what you call a practical nurse. She was just, that was her nature. She was a nursing, nurturing, caring woman. Very strong woman and a disciplinarian, but boy, even while we were growing up, we had chickens, and she had surgical tools, and she would make capons out of our roosters or male chickens while they were young, and she loved to do the surgery, go in and just pluck away some feathers and make an incision, take away a couple of jewels out of that little chicken, and he would grow to be a big, fat chicken, a capon, and good eating.
What traits do you think you inherited from your parents?
Well, let's see. Traits from my parents, certainly from my dad, a work ethic, patience, generally very calm. I do have a temper, which only erupts very rarely, but when it does, they tell me it's frightening. But it's over very quickly, and I hate it. But great sense of humor. Daddy and Mama, like many, many couples, clashed a good bit because Mama was a different personality, and Daddy learned that his best way of getting along with Mama was to make her laugh. And I've inherited that and put it to good use myself. Now, we've been married, Shirley and I, 57 years.
So did you have any siblings?
I had 1 brother and 2 sisters. My brother born the same day, a year after me. We were both born on June 1st, and that was partly through my mama's nursing engineering. She knew that the baby was going to be born somewhere very close to my birth date. And as I told Tom Snyder once on his late night show, that she took a half bottle of castor oil on May 31st because she wanted to let the peristaltic urges and maybe trigger the delivery of this baby. And again, didn't know if it was a boy or girl, and it worked. And so almost to the hour, my brother was born 1 year later on the same day. And when I told Tom Snyder, he said, "Well, you know, Pat, those are two different operations." I said, "Of course, Mom and I both know that." I guess thinking about it now, I guess it doesn't say much for my brother, does it? Mama had half a bottle of castor oil and delivered my brother. But anyway, he grew to be an inch taller than me, and a wonderful man. And then two sisters.
And what are their first names?
My sister Margie and Judy, and of course they were next in order, so they were our little younger sisters. And I say to my discredit that my brother Nick took more interest in my sisters than I did. I mean, we were a close family, but I was always so busy and involved from grade school on in all of my activities. And being 3-4 years ahead of my sisters, they had one set of friends, and they were girls, and I had another set, and I was always busy, and I was sort of being the eldest, sort of the trailblazer. My brother, following in my footsteps, but he just, I don't know, he just participated with and knew more about what my sisters were doing. I know that now. Of course, we're very close, and I just regret that I didn't seem to care more about what my sisters were doing. But they grew up to be not only sweet, good girls, but lovely women and mothers.
So, what was life like in the Boone household when you were small or growing up?
I guess you would say we had a real all-American traditional kind of family. Church-going, we were at every service. My dad wasn't a preacher, he was a contractor. Mama, a registered nurse, two very practical professions. But for them, and this transferred to the kids, it was just as practical and necessary and important to be at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and if there was a revival meeting going on, to be at every service. And we always sat up on the front row or second row, and we were always on time. And it was congregational singing, so Mama had a sweet sort of high, I would say, well, it could be alto or soprano voice. Daddy a bass, that's what I wanted to be. So, and my brother could sing tenor, and my sisters, of course, alto. So we could make beautiful music at home, and we often did, and for relatives and family, which is why I guess I'm a singer now, is that I learned to sing for my family gatherings. My brother and I played a little ukulele my mama taught us, and it was just fun, and I enjoyed it, and they seemed to like me doing it, so I took that right on into my school years and on. But we bowled together. We traveled back and forth to Jacksonville, Florida, my birthplace, and Mama's, where all her family lived, and we were close. We had fun together. We were Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, Cubs, all the school functions. Mom and Daddy were there participating, helping, and Daddy, being a carpenter by training as well as an architect, could make our toy guns that seemed very real to my brother and me. We lived on 10 acres on the outskirts of Nashville, and we had from time to time cows, which I learned to milk, my brother and I, and chickens and even some pigs a little while, boarded other people's horses. And I could go through our back pasture to the grammar school, where I went to school for 8 years. I just go back and forth through the pasture, watching where I stepped. We also had blackberry bushes, and my brother and I picked beautiful blackberries in the summertime. And then I and he worked for my dad as laborers, day laborers, in our, from about the 13, 14 on up, for several years we worked as day laborers, digging ditches, pouring concrete, toting lumber, and just, being common day laborers for my dad, who was the building contractor. So it was a fun, lower middle income kind of life. We didn't have a car until I was in the 8th grade, which was an embarrassment to me. But we had the company pickup truck, and Daddy built a wooden platform for my brother and me to sit on in the back of the truck in the open. And the sisters could ride up in the cab with Mama, but unless it was sleeting or pouring rain, no matter where we went. My brother and I sat in the back on a bench, and now when I see laborers today going down the freeway, sitting in the back of a pickup truck, I wave and try to communicate. I've been there, done that. And when I was in the 8th grade, Daddy got a little Chevrolet, two-door Chevy, no accessories. It had a heater. That was it. No radio, no air conditioning, nothing. But that car to me was the sweetest, most beautiful car that I've ever had in my life, because it was our first. And now, like my friends at school, I could actually sit in the back seat or learn to drive in a real car and not just Daddy's company pickup truck.
Right. You said you were busy as a child. Did you have, were you interested in anything? Did you have hobbies when you were growing up?
I was insatiably curious and interested in most everything. When I was in high school, our high school principal, I don't know, he conducted some IQ tests. I forget what they call them, Bernet tests. And they ascertained that I had been born with a very high IQ, like 170, which they tell me. I've never really kept up with it, but it's way above average IQ. Well, that gave me the capacity to be interested in a lot of stuff and to absorb things quickly and understand. And Shirley, my wife, as we were dating in high school, tells that when I would get to school on a test day, which I didn't remember we were having, and she'd say, "You ready for the test?" She'd studied all night. And I'd say, what? The test, we're having a test here in just 3 minutes. No, we are? Well, and so I'd get out my book on whatever subject it was and leaf through it, what we'd gone over for the last interim, and just try to remember what I scanned through, and I would make an A on the test, and she would too, but she knew I had studied for 3 minutes, and she'd studied all night long. Well, and I don't say that in any bragging way, because I was just born with that. So I was interested in school. I was interested in athletics. I was interested in music. I became president of the freshman class, the senior class in our high school, then student body president, captain of the baseball team, and just always, and then of course singing everywhere. When people found there was a kid in town, in Nashville, a musical town, who would keep up with the current pop songs and had a lady who would play piano for him for nothing. And I didn't ask for anything. I stayed real busy singing for businessmen's luncheons and ladies' clubs and high school programs and just stuff all over town. And I did it just because it was fun.
How young were you? I mean, what age did you actually sing so that the public can listen to you?
I was about 12 when I learned that at the Belmead Theater, which was a fancy suburb of Nashville, on Saturdays there was what they call the Belmead Happiness Club. A former vaudevillian named Ed Jordan put on a teenage or a kiddie talent show before the cartoon, before the serial, before the newsreel, before the movie, and feature some young talent. And if you performed, and if the crowd, the unruly crowd of kids, applauded and declared you the winner, you would get a banana split at the drugstore next door. If you came in second by his judgment, you would get a dish of ice cream, and then if you came in third, you would get a soda. Well, that's all I needed. I went over and I went to the dance studio that auditioned for the performers and got on, and for about 3 years, I was on like once a month at the Belmead Happiness Club. Ed Jordan referred to me as a young Bing Crosby because I sang Bing Crosby songs, and I could walk out in front of this movie theater full of kids who were running up and down the aisles, yelling, throwing popcorn on each other, guys pulling girls' hair, and sing a love song, a ballad of some type at the age of 11. I know, 12 or 13. And would sometimes get the most applause, so I'd get a banana split at the drugstore. And I liked that connection of singing, getting some response, even if it was rather hectic, from the audience, and then maybe getting some kind of an ice cream reward at the drugstore. So that embedded in me the fantasy that I would like to be a pop singer. I knew it was not likely, but at least I dreamed of it.
Did the teenagers respond to you differently than the adults when you were young and singing?
Yeah, I think that the kids my age, high school age, and even into college, I was a young guy. I, looked okay and sang current songs, and I sang them, I think, well. And so, of course, young kids and girls especially are drawn to somebody that can do that. I became known as Blue Moon Boone because in situations where I had no time to rehearse, if I had anybody to accompany me at all, they could play Blue Moon. Or if I had no accompaniment, I could sing Blue Moon, you saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own. And I could sing that, and the girls liked it. So I became known as Blue Moon Boone during my high school years.
You mentioned Bing Crosby. Were there other musicians or singers that influenced you at an early age?
Bing was always my role model. I won't say idol, although sure it came close to that. When I eventually met him, I thought, well, this is the ultimate. But I love Perry Como. I love Nat King Cole. Eddie Fisher, who was very big at that time. I guess those were my favorites. I liked Patti Page, who was popular before I was, but not very long before me. And so the ones I grew up listening to were Bing and Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Vic Damone, Eddie Fisher, the male singers that were all successful pop singers.
Where did you go to high school?
Went to school at a Christian high school, David Lipscomb High School in Nashville. Not a big school, although it was kindergarten through college, so there were a couple thousand students on the campus. In the high school were about 500, 600 maybe. So the classes weren't that big, and as I worked in the summertime for my dad, digging ditches and pouring concrete, and really, as I look back now, I was building churches and schools and homes, but all I knew was the ditch part. And I was saving the money, princely sum of $1.25. I think by the third year I was earning $1.50 an hour. And saved that so I could buy a few clothes and also pay some of my tuition so I could go to a Christian high school as opposed to just the regular secular high school that most of my friends went to, almost all my friends. But something in the way I was raised and the priorities that I felt made me want to go to a Christian high school where I would study the Bible as well as all the other subjects. And so it was a great context in which to grow up because, we had everything any of the other high schools had except a football team, and I wanted to play football. We did put together teams that were just amateur teams and very little equipment and play non-official games against other high school teams and get whomped because we didn't have coaches or much to speak of in the way of plays or strategies, but we played just because we loved it. And but other than that, it was a musical place. It was a place where teachers all knew you by name. You knew them. You weren't just a cipher. And you knew all the other kids. So it was a great environment.
Is there one particular kid that you met and married that was in high school with you? Whose name at the time was Shirley Foley?
Yes, Shirley Foley, the daughter of Red Foley, the legendary Country Music Hall of Fame singer. I met when we were 13, but I don't remember it. My wife does, because it was a American Legion baseball game, and I was at 13, and I was interested in the baseball, not girls. But a girl I knew and was a friend of Shirley's walked up and introduced us between innings. And I didn't pay that much attention. In fact, if I paid attention to either, it would have been this blonde girl that I already knew who was a year ahead of me in school and I thought was pretty cute. But I wasn't interested in girls yet. And Shirley, though, remembered that. So now, later, when her mom was ill and she had already been a very popular cheerleader at West High, transferred to our school and lived in the girls' dorm, the college girls' dorm, because her mom was ill and eventually died of a deteriorating heart condition. And I walked up this time. I remember that meeting very well. walked up to this beautiful-looking girl standing talking to the captain of our basketball team, which I was on, and asked him if he would introduce me to this pretty girl who had just transferred to our school. And he introduced me to Shirley Foley. And right after that, a day or two after that, we had a very unusual snowfall in Nashville. It didn't happen very often, but it was heavy enough that school was let out for a couple of days. So we got to know each other well in just neighborhood get-togethers on sleds and walking through the snow over to Joe's hamburger place. And we were holding hands within a couple of days, going steady soon after that for 3 years through high school. She was homecoming queen. I was president of the student body, escorted her in our basketball, homecoming games and stuff. And we really got thick. And then her mom died during that same period while we were still in high school, and that drew us even closer together. But I've never felt about anybody the way I did even then about Shirley. We were, I guess, the quintessential high school romance, and so though we've been married 57 years, we were going steady for 3 years before that.
Were you influenced by her dad, Red Foley?
Red Foley was a magnificent singer. He was the Bing Crosby of country music. In fact, Bing Crosby, my idol, said about Red Foley during the period that I was dating Shirley, he considered Red Foley the best singer in the nation. He had a #1 pop hit of Chattanooga Shoeshine Boy, and even some of his spiritual songs crossed over: Steal Away, Closer Walk with Thee, Peace in the Valley, Tennessee Saturday Night, Mississippi Mud, songs like that. And of course he wrote Old Shep, the classic story of the boy and his dog, and that was the first song Elvis ever sang in public, was my father-in-law's song that he wrote about his dog. So I looked up to Red greatly. I couldn't imitate him because, like Bing, Bing did have a certain crooning style, but Red he had a deep, rich baritone voice. He'd been trained operatically, but instead of going into the opera, he went to the Opry, the Grand Ole Opry. And so he had a great, unmatched kind of voice, but he sang with great, great sincerity, and that's the only thing I could emulate in Red, but I did. I think I, at least subconsciously, imitated Red in no matter what song I ever sang, even songs I didn't care for. If I was going to sing it, I was going to mean every word while I was singing it, and that's what Red did. So he couldn't help me in my pop aspirations, and I hadn't even cared that much about country music, oddly enough, growing up in Nashville, until I met Shirley. And when I met Shirley, I became a big country music fan. I'd go down sometimes, and she and I would visit backstage at the Ryman Auditorium during the Grand Ole Opry, where her dad was the major national star on the old Prince Albert radio portion of the Grand Ole Opry. And I learned that there was some really good music and some really good singers. And my first song that I ever wrote was a country song called "I Just Can't Believe It, Dear, Until You Tell Me So." And Shirley took me to see Eddie Arnold once, a friend of their family. And I sat there with my ukulele and played him my song. Very simple little song, although I did record it. But he said, "That's very nice, Pat, very nice." He said, "It's not for me, but keep on writing." And he, gave me sort of a pat on the back and encouraged me. I think back, here I was maybe 16 or 17, and playing a song for Eddie Arnold, a great, also Hall of Fame country singer. And he was so nice to me. Of course, that was very encouraging. But country music and pop music there was a great gulf fixed between the two, and I was more interested in pop.
How did you come to audition for the Ted Mack Amateur Hour in New York?
I entered a number of talent contests in Nashville because, I sang, and why not? And I always came in second. I almost always came in second to a trained operatic singer, a girl or boy, a trained pianist, a tap dancer, maybe a juggler, somebody that had spent many hours and many days and months learning what they did. And I was just a guy who could sing a pop song. So even if they had sometimes applause meters, and even if I got the most applause from the crowd, the judges would award it to really, and I understood it, a more deserving performer. And I was happy to come in second. So I entered the East Nashville High Talent Contest the summer I graduated from high school. And the first prize was a trip to New York and an audition with Ted Mack, the Amateur Hour, which was the American Idol show of its day. Viewers decided who won from week to week. And I auditioned, I don't mean audition, I sang that talent show and won, to my astonishment. I didn't expect to win. I put together a weird little medley. I couldn't decide whether to sing a pop song or a ballad with a big finish. So I decided, hey, I'll do both. So I sang a chorus. We ain't got a barrel of money. Maybe it's ragged and funny, but we'll travel along singing a song side by side. I believe for every drop of rain that falls. All the way to the big finish. I know why I believe. Well, it's an absurd little medley, but the audience loved it. And I thought, okay, maybe that's good for another second place. So I went out by a prearrangement with my parents to the parking lot outside the school and waited by the car so we could beat the traffic heading home. I knew that Shirley McGoy, a classical trained singer who I thought sang beautifully that night, would win. So I'm out at the car, and some guy comes to the back of the high school gym saying, "Pat Boone, where are you?" And I said, "I'm over here." "Get in here, you've won." "Won? Are you kidding?" I went and passed Shirley McGoy. McGoy, yeah. And she was weeping in the wings because she thought she was going to win too. And sure enough, the crowd was still applauding, wonder whatever happened to the guy we said was the winner. And I thanked everybody. I said, I think this is really nice of you, but I think Shirley ought to be the one that goes to New York. She's got a better chance of getting on the Ted Mack Amateur Hour and representing Nashville. Nope, you got to go. So I went, got on, won the first week, did not entertain the idea that I would win. So I came back to Nashville and by, again, prearrangement, went out to Beardstown, Tennessee, way out in the country. So far, they didn't have phones. This little rural country place. And I'm leading singing for a protracted gospel meeting, and sometimes afternoon and evening services. So it's Thursday, eating dinner at a farmhouse, family, entertaining the minister and me, and a car comes rattling up in the yard, scattering chickens and livestock out of the way, comes stomping up on the porch, knocks on the screen door and says, "Is there a fellow named Boone in there?" Yes, he's eating us out of house and home in here. And they said, "Well, we got to get him over to the next town where there's a switchboard. Somebody's trying to reach him from New York." And so I got in the car, went over to the lady's switchboard in her front room, and it was Oscar Schoonmaker from the Ted Mack show calling. He said, "Where are you? Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you. You're our winner. We got to get you back up here for Saturday night for the Ted Mack Amateur Hour." So I got somebody to drive me back to Nashville, packed up, flew to New York, got in there on Friday night, I guess. And then on Saturday was on the second night. And this time when I went back home, I made sure I was around a phone somewhere. And they did call, and I won the second week and the third. Well, that qualified me for the finals whenever there would be a bunch of three-time winners. Never knew when that would be. And it was a year and a half, and a lot happened in my life between the time I won the 3 times and appeared with the other 3-time winners, and so I almost forgot about it. I married, moved to Texas. We were expecting our first child. No, wait a minute, I'm ahead of myself. No. Yeah, by the time I was a 3-time winner, that had happened.
How old were you when you were on Ted Mack?
I was 18. I'd graduated from high school, and he was very nice to me. They learned in the pre-show interview that I was a descendant of Daniel Boone, and that seemed to be a hook that Ted Mack liked. I understand you're the great-great-great-great-grandson of Daniel Boone. Yes, sir, I am. And he said, well, let's welcome the grandson of the great pioneer. Here's Pat Boone. They told me, the Ted Mack show, that they never got such an avalanche of mail, cards and letters, from one part of the country as they did from not just Tennessee, but all over the South, because they just didn't usually have anybody from down south on the Ted Mack show emanating from New York City, mostly from the Northeast. But the cards and letters came pouring in Nashville, my hometown. People set up card tables on downtown corners with stacks of several hundred cards already addressed to the Ted Mack show, getting people to sign them. I vote for Pat Boone. About the third time, I stayed over after the show and went to church in New York on Sunday morning. And Jim Turner, the pitching coach of the Yankees, was at that service. And he said, when's your plane going home? I said, it's 5 in the afternoon or something. He says, you want to come out to Yankee Stadium? He was pitching coach for the Yankees. He said, I introduce you around. Well, of course. So I went out to Yankee Stadium and met Whitey Ford and Mickey Mantle and Phil Rizzuto and Yogi Berra and all these great Yankees. And Ted Turner brought some cards for them to sign and vote for me on the Ted Mack show. Later, after I'd won the third time, Schoonmaker told me, he said, you know, folks really wanted you to win. We had people in New York signing the names of Whitey Ford and Mickey Mantle, and of course we had to throw those cards out. I said, no, those were those guys. They did vote for me. I was there. I saw it. But they, you know, I won anyway. But it was what a tribute to have those guys, the Yankee greats, you know, voting for me. But it literally was like the American Idol, because the viewers chose through their cards and letters. And I don't remember now if it was phone calls as well. Probably not. But, you know, some great performers did not get voted through. Anne Margaret, I saw later, because I've hosted a great 2-CD package of the history of the Ted Mack show. And there's all kinds of wonderful videotapes of stuff like Beverly Sills and Robert Merrill and Robert Klein and Jerry Vale and Connie Francis and Anne Margaret was on. And she was a sweet young girl from Illinois, and she sang a song. But she was beat that night in the voting by a guy who played classical music on a leaf in his hands. and he won. The viewers wanted to see that again. There'd be a one-legged tap dancer, a one-arm piano player, a one-man band. I mean, they were just the strangest performers. It was almost like the Gong Show in a way, except these people were very serious about what they did. And some great performers. Gladys Knight was on. Frank Sinatra was on. He and the Hoboken Four did win. But so that was a great thing. And, you know, being a winner, I thought was great. Well, I've had my taste of pop music. Now I'm going back to be a school teacher and a preacher and a daddy of who knew how many kids yet.
So you married Shirley, you moved to Texas, and did you go to school? Did you go to college? I
transferred from David Lipscomb, the extenuation of the high school, David Lipscomb High School and college, and transferred to North Texas State, a great music school. I was thinking that even though I'm going to be a teacher and maybe a located preacher like my teacher role models, that I love music, I love to sing. Maybe if I learn to play something, I'll be, you know, it'll come in handy as I work with kids. And so North Texas was a great music school. We knew some people there that could sort of take us under their wings. So Shirley and I had just married a short time. We liked the idea of being on our own. So we left Nashville, drove from Nashville to Denton in a 1950 two-tone four-door Chevy that I had inherited from Daddy. It was not the original Chevy, but a later one. It was beautiful, two-tone green. And we had a U-Haul trailer on the back with everything Shirley and I owned, and we moved out to Denton, enrolled in North Texas State. And I got a job working on TV, Fort Worth, WBAP, Channel 5, the biggest station in the southeast Texas, but in the southwest of the country. Huge station. And I was doing a country music show on Friday nights, hosting at age 20. A teenage show they created for me, Teenage Talent, Foremost Teen Times on Saturday, and a radio show that they came up with called Oregon Moods, the lowest rated show in the history of radio. In fact, people gave their radios away if they heard this show once. It was a college kid reading poetry while a guy droned on behind him playing the organ. It had a minus rating. But for those two TV shows and radio show, I drove back and forth from Denton to Fort Worth, about 30 miles. And they paid me $50 a week and $44.50 take home. They withheld $5.50 from the $50. So Shirley and I were living on $44.50 a week in an upstairs apartment in a lean-over two-story student housing building, and happy as clams.
What were the earliest memories you had of watching television? Did you have favorite shows?
I do remember the first TV I saw was in the home of a friend. My dad and we couldn't afford TV. I was a radio addict at that time, and would listen to radio while I did my homework, to the consternation and concern of my parents. But I made straight A's, so they've quit worrying about it. But we went over to Margie Newman's house. Her folks were a little more well-to-do, and they had one of those oval picture screens, TV set, and we just would sit around and just gawk at anything, test patterns, whatever. Whatever, if it was moving and made noise, we were intrigued by it, And Ed Sullivan's show became the show I loved to watch and was most impressed by. It was performers, including singers, appearing on the nation's #1 TV show, Ed Sullivan. I don't remember us having a TV set at our home in Nashville till after we'd moved. I moved away at 19.
You were hosting in Texas on local TV. What qualities did you have that made you a good TV host, do you think?
I have always been, not that I don't have nerves, but unafraid to accept the challenge and confident that somehow I could handle it. So stepping in front of the camera, I'd had so much experience in Nashville singing for every group there was, and just being very extemporaneous, never having a script or each show was different, so I could walk in front of a TV camera and just be myself, and so it made me a natural kind of a host. I wasn't stilted. I didn't need cue cards. It was helpful if I did, but I could introduce people. I could introduce my own stuff. I could sing. I could even do a commercial. So on our teenage talent show, I was a soda jerk. I put on a soda jerk, and the set was a soda shop sponsored by Big Dairy. So I would do commercials for the ice cream and the milk and the cottage cheese and all that. And I'm just a 20-year-old college kid, but it worked, and the teenagers loved it, and it featured teenage talent. So I sort of felt in my element. And when I went on Ted Mack, I could tell looking at it now that I was nervous, but I looked calm, and I sang confidently. And then later, when I had the chance to be the host, I just knew I could do it.
And you auditioned for Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts about that time. How did that come about?
The Arthur Godfrey Talent Scout show I thought was going to be my undoing. Actually, it was a great boon, if I may say. My name Boone means blessing, by the way. Like the king granted a boon to his subjects, or so-and-so is a boon to his profession. We won't get into boondoggle right here, or boondocks. I think Billy Joe Royal had the
down in the boondocks.
Down in the boondocks. But I think that's the absence of blessing is what that is. But anyway, I had done my last appearance, I know it was the 3-time winner appearance, which was my last appearance on Ted Mack. I had to wait from Saturday till at least Thursday to know who was going to be named the winner. And they told me later I was leading handsomely in the voting. But while I was waiting, I'd seen the Arthur Godfrey Talent Scout show. So I went over to CBS, asked if I could audition for that. I was alone in New York City. And so I was ushered into a studio, big old cold TV studio, and a woman I met, but she went into the control room and had an engineer, and so I couldn't even see her. I'm just standing alone in a bare studio with a mic. She says, "Sing us something." So I sang, "Blue Moon, you saw me standing alone," you know. And she said, "Nice, can you come back in 3 weeks?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm going home maybe Thursday. And my wife's expecting a baby, and so I'll have to go home." She said, "Okay, we'll put you on tonight." Really? So now you have to have a talent scout, somebody to introduce you, somebody that knows you. Well, I didn't know anybody in New York, but I called home and got a friend of our high school principal. Actually, it was his sister-in-law. And she came on the show that night with Arthur Godfrey, introduced me. I sang "I Think I Believe." And I had a little New Testament in my pocket, hoping for a 3-way tie, as I'd seen happen on that show. They had a couple other, extremely talented people. And for some reason, the applause meter went like this, and Arthur Godfrey says, "Pat, you're our winner." So I get for that the next 4 mornings on his radio show. Well, of course, it hadn't occurred to me, but you can't be declared a winner of a talent show on Saturday when you've been declared a professional winner on the previous Monday. And so I was disqualified from the Ted Mack show. They said I would have won it, and that came with a scholarship. All I got for appearing on Godfrey's show at that time was 4 mornings on his morning show, and then back to Denton. Stopped off in Nashville, met Randy Wood of Dot Records, who said, "I think you ought to make a record for our little aggressive record company." Going back to Denton, and when we find a song I think will be a hit, I'll call you. 8 months went by, so I thought, hey, he's forgotten all about it. But in March of '55, he did call and said, "I've got a song for you. I'll send you the ticket. Meet me in Chicago. Let's make a hit," which we did.
And what was the name of that record?
That record was "Two Hearts, Two Kisses." It was an R&B hit by a group called the Charms on the Dutone label. It was unknown to pop audiences. Even though it was a big R&B hit, at that point, R&B, rhythm and blues, was called race music. It was its own genre, had its own charts, radio stations. My brother had listened to an R&B station in Nashville, but I didn't know why he was intrigued by that. I was listening to Perry Como and Bing Crosby. So I said, "Randy, you've got to," he called me in Denton, said, "I've got this song. What is it?" He says, "Two Hearts, Two Kisses." So I'm envisioning 2 hearts, 2 kisses, or something like that, a Perry Como type song. He says, "I'll play you a little bit of it. 1 heart's not enough, baby. 2 hearts will make you feel crazy. 1 kiss will make you feel so nice. 2 kisses take you to paradise. 2 hearts, 2 kisses make 1 love." I said, "Randy, have you got that on the right speed?" And I flew to Chicago. Stayed all day in my hotel room listening to the record and trying to capture that flavor, and recorded it till 2 in the morning, and came out of the studio, and Randy Wood of Dot Records and we all felt like we have a hit. This is a smash, his favorite word. Next day we found that Frank Sinatra had just recorded it. Doris Day, the Lancers, the DeCastro. There were about 5 other records by known artists, and I was the only unknown guy. My first real professional record. And so he sent me, Randy Wood, to 20 cities in 18 days to promote the record. And I went on every TV show. Talk about work ethic. 20 cities in 18 days. Every TV show, every radio station, department store buyers, jukebox operators, rack jobbers. I mean, anybody that was going to sell records. The promoters took me around, and one thing was kind of a compliment, that sometimes the DJs or program directors in the various cities, when the promotion guy would say, "I got this kid Pat Boone, he's got this record of Two Hearts, Two Kisses, and they'd look at me and say, "Yeah, you're Pat Boone, yeah." I said, "What do you mean? Pat Boone's colored." "No, this is Pat Boone." I captured enough of the flavor of the real rock and roll, of the real rhythm and blues, that they assumed that that recording artist was black. So I'd have to show them my bracelet or my driver's license, and so then I'd be on the show. But I thought, wow, 20 shows in 18 days. The record became the hit. Bill Randall, the nation's #1 DJ, declared my version the hit over Frank Sinatra, Doris Day, or whoever. And the other DJs around the country took his lead. So my next record was Ain't That a Shame, Fats Domino's big R&B hit. And I didn't have to go around the country promoting it. I mean, it just started getting played on the air and went right to #1. And I thought, whoa, this is what being a recording artist is, huh? I'd like more of this. So from then on, I didn't know this for many years, but from that time in March of '55 until 220 weeks later, I was never off the single chart. 1 week. I was always on with at least 2 records. One record going down and disappearing off the chart, the other going up. And the closest anybody ever came to that particular distinction was Elton John, about 157 weeks. And then for some reason he was off the chart for a week, and you got to go back, start over. Elvis went in the Army after 2 or 3 years of intense popularity, and he wasn't recording. The Beatles, after about that same amount of time, began to put out just albums, and then let the fans pick whichever cuts they wanted to be played. So, and weren't always on the single chart in an unbroken string. So for 220 weeks, 4 years, I was never off the charts. I just lived there, and it was a terrible shock the first time I opened Billboard or Cashbox and I didn't find my name on anybody's chart. And I was on again after that, but that was quite a string.
Now tell me if this story is true. I've heard this, that you had studied English in college,
Mm-hmm.
and when you were presented with Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino, did you consider changing the lyric to Isn't That a Shame, or is that just an urban legend?
It is the absolute truth that having recorded Two Hearts, Two Kisses, that now the next big hit I'm going to do is Ain't That a Shame, and I'm about to transfer to Columbia University, a big Ivy League school. I'm going to major in English. And I said to Randy Wood, "Can I just sing Isn't That a Shame?" "I don't think so." He said, "Try it. You made me cry when you said goodbye. Isn't that a shame?" He said, "No, it's cut. That's not going to work, Pat. It's Ain't That a Shame." I said, "Well, that's not good English, but okay." And so the upshot of that was, not only was it a #1 multi-million selling hit, and made Fats Domino a lot of money too, by the way, by his own account, but ain't entered the dictionary as accepted usage. So it would have been accepted even at Columbia.
Now this happened after Arthur Godfrey. I just want to go back there before we move on, but what was your first impression when you met Arthur Godfrey?
Arthur Godfrey was, it's kind of, bigger than life personality. He literally ruled radio and television for a while. His show was the biggest show, not just on his morning show 5 days a week, and every woman in America practically was tuned to him on radio, which was simulcast with his TV show. Every day, he was just a member of the family, and he wore so well because he had a little bit of naughtiness about him, but he was funny, and he was wise, and there was something in that voice and his demeanor. Everybody wanted to know him. Men loved him, and women, and kids. So then he did a Monday night talent scout show, which was big, and then a Wednesday night hour, a variety hour, and of course I was on that a lot because I became a regular on his show. He was kind of a Renaissance man in that he was up to speed and up to date on all the technology of radio and TV, but also flying. He became not only a great pilot, had his own plane, but and he was a dear friend of Curtis LeMay, General LeMay, head of the Strategic Air Command, and actually Arthur was able to fly the biggest jets and biggest planes that existed at the time, though his own private plane was a DC-3. I'd noticed when he smoked a cigar, all 5 fingertips were on the cigar. When he flew, all 5 fingertips were on the stick of the wheel, at the end of the stick of the plane. He was a tactile man. He was hands-on. He was very curious about everything, very interested, great sense of humor, and he appreciated loyalty. So when he fired Julius LaRosa on the air, it was because Julius had demonstrated to him a lack of loyalty or appreciation. He was now taking Arthur for granted, who had hired him on the air and gave him a career. And he fired him on the air, which was a terrible thing for Arthur, because his popularity began to diminish after that. I came along after Julius, and he never had a contract with anybody. I went from week to week. Mm-hmm. The McGuire sisters and Tony Marvin and Carmel Quinn and Holly Loki and Frank Park, all of them were just week to week. I would finish a week on his morning show after I became a regular. As a former winner, he would, his producer, Frank Musiello, would say, "See you Monday." Or if he didn't, I would say, "Do you want me to come in Monday?" "Oh, yeah." And so it was that week to week for about a year and a half. And I went in to see him one day after the show, because he knew I was very loyal and I always brought new songs, and we had a lot of rapport. I would set him up for some of his funny jokes, and he appreciated that. And I went in to see him in his office after the show, and I said, "Mr. Godfrey, I'd like to ask for a little leave of absence." "Why?" I said, "Well, I've got a chance to go to Hollywood and make a movie." "You? Make a movie?" I said, "Yes." So he said, "Well, go ahead, make the movie, and then come back and tell us what it's like, all right?" And so because I asked his permission, I came back after making the movie and was on a few more times. When I graduated from Columbia, he gave me a beautiful Tiffany watch to Pat Boone for cum laude, because I graduated magna cum laude. And he appreciated the fact that I was a family guy, that I was diligent. I was very appreciative of the exposure he was giving me, and I really tried to give him my best ever.
So by that time, you had moved with the family from Texas to New York?
Yes. After when Ain't That a Shame was becoming a hit, it was clear I was going to have to not operate from Denton, Texas. And it was a chance to go to Columbia University, an Ivy League school that I had always wanted to do. Still thinking I'm going to be a teacher, so this will be, if I graduate from Columbia University, I can get a good teaching job. So I did transfer to New York.
Was that a big adjustment? I mean, basically growing up in Nashville, living in the South your entire life, was New York kind of a shell shock situation, or how was that?
I must say, culturally, I love New York, but to live there, no. I'm not a fan of concrete. I love green grass. I grew up in Tennessee. I milked cows. I had a big back pasture. And so Shirley and I moved as quickly as we could from a hotel after our second child was born, soon after we got there. I mean, within days after we got to New York to be on Godfrey's show and enroll at Columbia. And we moved out to Teaneck, New Jersey. First to Leonia, New Jersey, almost a tract house. And that was our home for a while. And then Teaneck, a nice big 3-story home in Teaneck, quiet neighborhood. But I would drive across the George Washington Bridge and down into the concrete jungle and do whatever I had to do. Had offices, studio, TV shows, all of that. But then I couldn't wait to get in the car and head back across the bridge and get out to New Jersey.
You talked about when you were a regular on Godfrey's show that you would come with new songs. How are those songs chosen that you performed?
I always chose the songs, and they were taken right off the hit record charts. I'll never forget, one morning I had prepared Guy Mitchell's big hit, Singing the Blues. Big hit. And that's all I did. I brought in sometimes ballads or standards, but usually songs that were current hits. And of course, pretty soon, I was bringing my own hits and introduced rock and roll songs like Ain't That a Shame, and he kidded me about that. And then Crazy Little Mama at my front door, and Tutti Frutti. He gave me a real fit over Tutti Frutti. But I was singing my own hits, having hit after hit, But then this one morning, he did his show in 15-minute segments. And whoever was ready to be introduced next would stand in the hall looking through the glass into the studio, big studio audience, and then Arthur on the stage behind his desk. So when he got down toward a 15-minute break, I knew there would be maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes before he would introduce me. So I'd been standing there looking through the glass, and I didn't realize he'd seen me standing out there. And so this is the kind of guy he was. So I thought, oh, man, I've got to go to the bathroom. So I went running down the hall. I thought, it's only like 2 minutes till the end of the segment. He's not going to introduce me now. So I went running down the hall to the bathroom. And almost immediately maybe I waited too long. Maybe the show started, but in the next 15-minute segment. But I hear Tony Marvin standing in the hall. Boone, Boone, where are you? And I said, I'm in here in the bathroom. Get in here. And I could hear my music playing. So now I run up the hall into this, and I had a piece of Danish in my hand and my sheet music. And because I wanted to lay it there because I wasn't too familiar with the lyrics. And it was before the 15-minute segment ended, now I remember, because fortunately I didn't know the whole song and I didn't have to sing it. He introduced me. He saw me leave and thought, I'll get Pat. He knew I was going to the bathroom. He waited, introduced me, and now sitting there playing on the ukulele while the intro plays over and over. And I come running in, and I knew I had to empty one hand, and by mistake, I threw away the sheet music and went to the mic holding a piece of Danish and sang, well, I never felt more like singing the blues. And it was very appropriate. And he laughed, and the audience laughed, and we went away to the 15-minute break. So he was a prankster, and he loved to put people on the spot. And so we got along great because I liked that too.
And of course, everything was live then, right?
All live. You couldn't go back and redo anything.
As you were becoming well known, what's your first memory of being approached by fans? I mean, not just a national, but like fans who saw you on a national, basis.
I had experienced some of the fan adulation even in Nashville after I appeared on the Ted Mack show. Everywhere I went after that for 3 weeks, and then later, the kids would scream and want autographs and souvenirs. And so I'd gotten sort of broken in and used to that. Then doing shows on Fort Worth television, some of the same. Now, when the records started happening, it was madness, really was madness. And, you had to have some police security or a manager and a couple of strong-arm guys around you because the kids just went berserk. I was in England on stage, and it was not wise, but they had bleachers set up on the back of the stage. The orchestra was off to the side, and the audience was jammed, and it was all screaming kids. So I'm singing, getting about halfway through the show, and kids got out of their seats and rushed the stage from out front. That was too much for the people behind, and they came out of their bleachers and immediately I was pinned in and imprisoned by hundreds and hundreds of screaming, nutty kids. One decided to take my tie as a souvenir, ignoring the fact it was knotted around my neck, and she tried to take it away with her. And I'm trying. My hands are pinned at my side, but I, of course, got a hand up and jerked the tie back. I had to cut it off. And the police, it took them just that long, a few seconds, to get through the crowd and pin them, get them away. But of course, it's flattering, but at the same time, I'd had enough experience now to know that they're excited about any guy that sings a pop song. It's not just me. And I saw it happening to so many others too. If you had a hit record, you're going to have screaming kids. So I just took it as sort of a fact of life. And of course I was married and was having kids one after the other. 4 kids in 3.5 years. I should have been jailed or neutered, actually. So I just took it in stride. I knew it was part of the game, but it didn't make me feel like I'm somebody really special.
Okay. We're going to change